Hey guys, it's Christy, and today I'm going to be reviewing Brightly Burning by Alexa Donne. I was really excited to read this book. I've been following Alexa Donne on her AuthorTube channel for a while now. In case you're not familiar, Alexa is a traditionally published author, and on her channel she shares a lot of advice and her experience as a traditionally published author, which I find really useful, especially for me, considering that I'm still in the in-between, not sure which way I'm going to be published. But I find her advice and her experience really valuable. She recently shared a video on what to do when you have an agent wanting to work with you and how to navigate that and the questions to ask and everything. So she has a lot of that kind of content on her channel. So this is her debut, and it is a retelling of Jane Eyre but set in space. And so that was sort of the hook, was Jane Eyre in space. And I really liked that because I've always really appreciated science fiction, but also classics. You know, I love Jane Eyre. I love that story. I love romance. And so just having those things blended together was just perfect for me. And so I was really excited about this. And of course, you know, I love supporting debut authors. So it was all just a perfect combination. Okay, so before I get too into it, I just wanted to say this is going to be a spoiler-free review. I'll touch on the plot, but I'm not going to like reveal the ending or anything like that. So this book is set in an after-Earth setting in space, right? So everyone's living on these spaceships orbiting Earth, and they're basically waiting for Earth to become habitable again. And sort of the over-looming threat is that people might be sent down to Earth before they know that it's survivable. And so that's sort of something that I really enjoyed, was that there was this threat of that, and it was very different from Jane Eyre, you know. So I liked that that kind of made it stand on its own and be its own story. I'll get into a little bit more in a second. But so Stella is living on this ship. It's the poorest of the fleet of ships, and it's the one that's most at risk of being sent down to Earth prematurely. And so she wants to get away from the ship, even though there are people on the ship that she loves, and doesn't want to leave them. It's kind of either she leaves or she, you know, risks her life by staying on this ship. So she puts out some feelers for a job and ends up getting a job on this really mysterious ship. I believe, if I am right, it's orbiting the sun, and most of the other ships are orbiting the Earth. So this one's very isolated from the rest of the fleet. And so it's kind of, she's in this whole other world, you know, it's very isolated. There are hardly any crew members on this ship, and it's very rich, you know, so she's suddenly living in luxury on this new ship, and which is really different for her. And it's on this ship that she meets Captain Hugo. Captain Hugo is the new version of Mr. Rochester. He's a much younger version, because this book is a YA. So he has taken on the responsibility of ship captain at a very young age, and for reasons that I won't divulge, because, you know, you should read the book. But so Stella gets a job as the governess for his sister. And so there are some things that have happened, the reason why it's sort of the two of them on their own, and that they don't have family. So the book pretty much sets up just like Jane Eyre does, where Stella is in this impoverished place, and she gets a job as a governess, and things kind of go from there. But I will say that this book definitely does bring something of its own to the table. In terms of plot, it doesn't exactly follow Jane Eyre. It's similar, but it does have its own concept, which I really appreciated. Like I said, there's that sort of looming threat of being forced to go to Earth, and that plays a huge role. And, you know, there's also the fact that they're in space. It creates a lot of situations that are very different from the original story, which I really enjoyed. One of the things that I really liked about this book, and that I thought Alexa did really well, was the language and the jargon of this book. Because, you know, it's in the future, and it's set in space, so people talk differently, which I feel like people don't always do that. They don't always think to incorporate their own jargon. even in fantasy and stuff like that. I feel like I haven't seen that a whole lot. So I thought that was really unique and very well done. Like, for example, they use the word frex a lot, and that's a cuss word, you know, so whenever they're, they stub their toe or something doesn't work out, they're like, frex. So I thought that that was really cool and interesting, and that definitely helped me get invested in this world that she painted. And speaking of worlds, I thought that she did a great job of world building in this book. I definitely felt like I was in space. I felt like I was on a spaceship, and yeah, even, you know, when they're traveling through space, she did a really good job of putting the reader exactly where the characters were. So I thought that that was great. Wherever Stella was in time, because there are different ships that she would be on throughout the book, she did a good job of differentiating those places. You know, the first, when she's in the spaceship, the rundown spaceship where lack of resources and all that stuff, she definitely painted that picture for us. And then when she's on the Stalwart, which is Hugo's spaceship, it's definitely more, it's mysterious and dark, but it's also, you know, lavish and luxurious and rich. And then, you know, she's on some other spaceships. She definitely differentiated all of those, so that was great. I loved how smart Stella was. You know, she was a teacher, but she was also a mechanic, and she was very capable and strong, but she was also open and vulnerable, and I like the pairing of those things. Another thing that I really liked about it was the artificial intelligence in this book. So there's a character, Rory, and she's basically her own character, but she's she's an AI in the Stalwart, and so she becomes Stella's friend, which I thought was really cool. Again, I'm a lover of sci-fi. I just love stuff like that. So I thought that that was a really good choice, because obviously you're talking about the future. I mean, there is going to be artificial intelligence, and I thought that that was a really good choice to incorporate that and also make her sort of her own character, you know. Okay, so as far as the romance, I was really pleased to see, you know, some of my favorite scenes from Jane Eyre recreated in this book. But I will say the one thing that I didn't really care for, and this is just me, I don't think it's a reflection on, you know, Alexa's writing or anything like that, but I didn't really enjoy the fact that Hugo was as young as he was. And I think that's just, that's the category of this book is YA, so of course he's going to be a teenager. But for me, and I think it's just because I kept comparing him to Mr. Rochester, and I think that was one of the things that made Mr. Rochester so mysterious and compelling, was the fact that he was older than Jane Eyre, and so he just had more life experience, and he just was more mature. He came with this like maturity, and so I don't know, I just felt like that was lacking with Hugo. He didn't really seem super mature. Maybe it was just because I knew how old he was. So it's probably just me. And the only other thing I would say as far as a critique of the romance would just be just the themes of marriage. I don't know if I was completely sold on the necessity to get married. You know, in the original Jane Eyre, Jane and Mr. Rochester are about to get married when, you know, S hits the fan. And so obviously that's recreated in this book as well. But I just felt like the whole concept of marriage was a little bit weird just in this setting. I didn't really understand it. I didn't feel like it was necessary, and that if you're going to have the characters as young as they are, either give them a really good reason to want to get married. I felt like they could have just as well been in a relationship, and I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. I would say I really enjoyed this, but I think I would have preferred it to be an adult book rather than a young adult. On the other hand, I feel like this is a great way to introduce that story to a younger generation. So I think that that's great. It's just my personal preference. I would have maybe appreciated the characters being adults, but that's okay. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention about this book is that Alexa had some really diverse characters in it, which I thought was awesome. I haven't seen that a ton in YA. A lot of her characters came from different ethnic backgrounds and had really cool, interesting names. I thought that the pacing was great and it kept me turning the pages. And I also really liked, one other thing I was gonna say, I also really liked how Stella had different types of relationships in the book. I do think, especially in YA, it seems like if you ever have a guy who's a friend, that person wants to date you. You know, you being the main female protagonist. It's like they're always going to want to date you. And I really liked how Stella had all these different male friends, and they were different. There were different levels of friendship, you know what I'm saying? Different relationships, because in life you have all these different kinds of relationships, people that bring different things to your life. And so I thought that was really cool. And so yeah, those are all of my thoughts on Brightly Burning by Alexa Donne. If you've read it, definitely let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.